Hello and welcome to the latest University of Glasgow MCSB podcast. I'm Lucy Alford and today I'm joined with Anir and Aphrodite.
Hi, I'm Anir. I'm the bioinformatician of the Dow Davis Lab. And with us is our guest podcast host today.
Hello, I'm Aphrodite and I work as a postdoc in Darren Monkton's group, and I'm working on Huntington disease and I'm trying to understand the mechanisms underlying the disease.
And today we are speaking to Professor Jenny Morton, who is Professor of Neurobiology at the University of Cambridge, and she is also Director of Studies in Medicine and Veterinary Medicine at Newnham College, Cambridge. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you.
So to begin with, in layman's terms, could you please explain your research to us?
So I work on Huntington's disease, which, as you know, is a horrible neurodegenerative disease. And when I set my lab up, I was really just interested in how the disease was caused and whether or not we could treat it. So all my career, since I set my lab up, I've looked at the disease as the focus, and I figured out multiple ways of looking at it. So some parts of my lab work on the molecular mechanisms like repeat instability. Others work on mice, where we're looking at behavior, and most recently I've started working on sheep because there's a Huntington sheep model.
You have, as you said, you have recently begun working on sheep as a model organisms. Why have you selected sheep as a model organism?
Well, you know, I didn't select sheep so much as sheep selected me, because my collaborators in Australia and New Zealand made a transgenic Huntington sheep, and they said, would I do the behavioural work on it? And I said, sure. I knew nothing about sheep, despite the fact that I come from New Zealand. But I thought it was a really good opportunity because the sheep has a really big brain and mice have really tiny brains. And so if you're interested in how the pathology develops, then having a large-brained animal is ideal. And that's why they developed the sheep. Behaviourally, though, nobody had ever done any proper behaviour on sheep. And to be honest, I thought it wasn't going to be possible, but I'm now 100% convinced that you can do really good quantifiable behaviour on sheep. So not only do we have a big-brained animal that has great potential for brain pathology, as you'd see with humans, but you can also measure behaviour in a way that you can quantify it. So if somebody develops a treatment, you could say, let's see what this treatment does. Does it improve the HD sheep? Does it not? Or does it have side effects? You know, so these are really important aspects. So sheep chose me.
So, as you mentioned, there are many advantages in using larger, more complex animal models. So would you say in the future, to study this kind of diseases, we should start moving towards that, or would we keep mice as a model?
Mice are invaluable because you can manipulate the genome. But, you know, sheep have a genome as well. It's just that they don't have as many offspring as mice do, so the sort of practicalities of manipulating genes are more challenging in a sheep. But mice are nocturnal, humans are diurnal, sheep are diurnal. Mice have got tiny brains. They don't have basal ganglia like humans do. Sheep have really well developed basal ganglia. Mice have reproduced, they eat, they run around. They're very difficult to measure cognitive function, and I tried for 10 years to measure some of the tasks that sheep can do really easily. They have social lives. Sheep live in flocks, so they actually have social lives. So you can measure social and emotional behaviour in them, which you just can't do in mice. So there are many reasons I think we should move to larger animals. And the other alternative is a monkey, which I have serious scientific problems with. Ethics aside, the scientific problems of using a monkey model of Huntington's disease that may have movement disorder, psychiatric disorder, cognitive decline. How do you study a monkey that is psychotic because it's carrying the Huntington gene? I think these are real challenges. So large animals, yes, but using animals that you can then do scientific experiments that are good, definitely.
Excellent. What would you say has been your biggest challenge in your research?
That's a good question. I don't think there is one biggest challenge. You know, research is just one constant challenge: getting money, organising your life. I have children, figuring out how to, deal with practicalities, learning stuff, teaching, lecturing, just balancing everything is a big challenge. Scientifically, I've never really been that bothered by going out on a limb and doing something new if it was interesting. So the challenges that I look back now and go, I was mad to have done the sheep stuff, but at the time I thought it was a good idea. And now I look back and think, gosh, that was a big challenge. But I think challenges, if you take them one little step at a time, are
It works out.
achievable. So
Yes.
I used to climb when I was young, so I just do it like a mountain, just one safe pathway at a time.
That sounds good. Where do you see this field going in the next 50 years? What would be the big questions in the future? Because we know now, for instance, for Huntington disease, we're going on a clinical trial soon.
Yes.
And there are also other models developed, like Huntington disease pig model, for instance. So
we don't need lots of other models. We have wonderful mouse models, and models are just that. They have limitations. They model things. They're not the same as disease. Humans have diseases. The animals are just models. I don't think we need more models. I think the challenge in the future is that we don't understand. We currently don't even understand what Huntington, the protein, does, and the strategies for knocking Huntington out to remove the toxic gene is risky because we don't know what the protein does. So I think the future, I hope that the knockdown strategy works, because then we won't have a problem. But the gene's unstable, so
Yes.
you knock it out in one person, there are going to be thousands of people who aren't going to be suitable for that treatment, and do we just pretend that they don't exist for the next 20 or 30 years? And Huntington's is just one of 9 similar disorders with an unstable mutation in a protein, and one of many disorders with mutations. So we have a lot of other diseases that we don't know enough about. I wish I could say that in the next 5 years we won't have to worry about it, but for the people who have these other rare diseases, I think there's a lot to still work on.
Before I go on to the next question, I understand that you're from New Zealand.
I am.
And you work with sheep. I don't know if you know about this 2006 movie called Black Sheep.
I do. Yes. It's a great cult movie. Yes.
The first thing that came to my mind is mutant sheep. But yeah, so you're from New Zealand, and you've established your career in the UK, in the University of Cambridge. What are the biggest differences between the the university systems, working there as opposed to working here? Did you find anything different?
So I did my PhD in New Zealand, but I came to Cambridge to do a postdoc, and I basically came for a year and I've never left.
Okay.
So I've never worked in the university system in New Zealand, but I think it was set up in the same way. It's a British-based system, and but I've never worked there, so I've only worked in Cambridge.
Right, okay. And do you miss anything about New Zealand?
Yes, I miss hills, I miss the sea, I miss really good food, I miss fish, I miss lots of things.
Warm weather in December, maybe?
Yes, Christmas, yeah. Well, where I come from is the very north of New Zealand, and maybe you have a frost occasionally, like every 4 years, but and it's flat, so mostly I miss the hills and the sea, because Cambridge is a long way from the sea, and it's very flat.
Maybe you should come to Wales, because we have hills and we have a lot of sheep as well.
But you do, but you also have a lot of rain.
We do, yes.
As does Scotland.
As does Scotland, yes.
It hardly ever rains in Cambridge, so that's a good thing about Cambridge.
Yeah,
It hardly
yeah.
ever rains. Yeah.
Which would be what as you said, you've never been back career-wise there. So what you like most about the UK?
Well, I work in Cambridge, and Cambridge is an amazing place to work. So I'm at a college, so I meet really interesting people from all fields. So I can sit down for dinner one night and be sitting next to a classicist or a historian or an economist or a lawyer, I don't just mix with scientists, so that's the best thing about being in Cambridge, is that you meet amazing people, and they're all clever, and our students are clever as well, so it's a wonderful place to work.
I actually lived in Cambridge for 3
Did
years
you?
because I was an undergraduate
Yeah,
there, and I miss it so much. It is just such a beautiful city. And one thing I find about Cambridge is you really get that academic buzz as well. That, as you say, there's a lot of very intelligent people there, and no matter who you're surrounded by, you can just have these fantastic, stimulating conversations. And I do find myself pining for Cambridge a lot, just because the architect is beautiful, with the River Cam as well, and the punting, and summer sat in the anchor overlooking the river. So yeah, lots of fond memories of Cambridge.
Yeah, it is. The buildings are, and so coming from New Zealand, where it was a colony in 1842, and so to be able to go into rooms that have been there for 800 years is extraordinary for me, and to have streets. I mean, my college is a young college, and it's only 150 years old, but that's quite old.
Yeah, and then you've got Peterhouse, that is 10 something or 11 something. Yeah,
800 years. A couple of years ago.
Yeah. You recently gave a TEDx talk entitled "What Can We Learn from Sheep?" So how was that experience?
It was really interesting, actually. That it was. I mean, I give talks often, but it had to be scripted, which I never give scripted talks, and that was the really difficult thing for me, is to actually stand up and give a 10-minute scripted talk. But I love talking about Huntington's, and I had a chance to talk about the friends I have who have had Huntington's and why I did it. So no data, but it was a great experience. You should watch it.
Yeah,
We have.
Huntington's disease is a subject matter that many members of the general public will unfortunately understand all too well. Do you feel that outreach activities still hold a value in your research in bridging that gap between the science and the general public?
Yes, so I do. I don't do a lot of outreach, but I do regular outreach. So I mean, the last thing I did was a knit-a-thon,
Fantastic.
where people were knitting knitting their own neurons to actually increase understanding. We do science fairs. I talk to lay groups often. And I talk to people. I used to catch the bus from Cambridge when I was after supervision. When the kids were small, I used to catch the bus. And if you catch a bus after a dinner, everybody's had a few drinks. You sit down. Mostly people in England don't talk to you, but after a few drinks, they will talk to you on the bus. And I lived about 40 minutes bus ride from Cambridge, so I could sit on the bus, and you have a captive audience on your next seat, and people would say, "Oh, where have you been? What do you do?" So then I could tell them about Huntington.
Fantastic.
So outreach doesn't just happen in organised outreach.
Yeah, that's a great take-home message. Yeah. And what do you see as the biggest misconceptions that the public have about your research?
So there was always an issue about using animals.
Yes.
And that's something that we have an open lab policy. So if somebody wants to come, I had an infiltrator in my lab, a BUAV, a British Union for Abolition of Vivisection infiltrator in the lab, which caused me a lot of headaches because they released videos of my sheep actually. And after that, they had a big inquiry, it was a government inquiry that was very unpleasant for a year. And it ruined my research for a year, and that we couldn't do a lot of stuff. But after that, I decided to have an open lab policy that if anybody wants to come to the lab, they can. So, and that has sort of, the interest of journalists has disappeared because nobody wants to come to a lab that they're welcome to. They just want to come to a lab. But I think using animals is the biggest misconception, is that we do use animals, but we use animals very carefully and in a measured way. And this is one of the great things about sheep, that some of the sheep, I got the first lot of sheep I ever got to try out doing some of my cognitive testing. I've just sent them up to Aberystwyth to my postdoc to carry on their work. I've had them for 9 years, so I've had 7 sheep that have really helped us understand how cognitive testing can work in a very small group of sheep. So, yeah, and the other misconception is about sheep. People go, why do you work on sheep? Sheep are really stupid. You're interested in cognitive function and neurodegenerative diseases. You can't work on sheep. But they're completely wrong. So the misconception about sheep being stupid and bad animals to do research on is completely incorrect.
Well, I like the way you've shown that sheep can actually recognise human faces, which I thought was, incredible.
Yeah, well, I saw the videos as well, and I thought that is very amazing. It's like sheep usually tend to, again, the misconception that sheep tend to follow rather than use your own brains. Therefore, you have sheepdogs or water shepherds to follow. But in those videos, the sheep knew exactly what it was doing or where it was supposed to go or what to recognize. So there was quite a lot of...
But that was quite important, because when I started working on sheep, people said, you can't use sheep for behaviour because you cannot isolate sheep. You can't take them away from their flock mates or they get stressed. And this was, for me, I thought was going to be a real problem, because you can't do behavioural testing with a group. So, but actually sheep will happily work by themselves if they trust their handler. And so, my sheep would rather come and do an experiment than they would stay in the barn. So and our sheep, as you'll see if you're going to come to my talk, they have a choice in what they do, so they do not have to do the experiment. If they don't feel like it, they don't have to do it. They have a choice, but they will always choose to do it. And I took a visitor to see my sheep the other day, and one of the sheep, because we were setting it up for this person to see, she was very impatient about it, and she bangs on the door with a hoof. So the person was going like, she really, really wants to get in there and start, and we were being a bit slow. So they trust you, and then they will work very happily.
It's awesome.
So changing a bit now the subject, our institute and also the University of Cambridge has recently won an Athena Swan Award, which promotes women in science and aims to tackle gender inequality. As a leading woman in science, what do you think the big challenges are in this area? And have they changed compared to when you started in science?
That's a good question, and it's a difficult question. They have changed quite a bit. They haven't changed enough in that women, there's still discussion about whether we should do more for them, and until you stop discussing it, then it's still a problem. Women, ethnic minorities, when you're discussing the fact that you have few people from ethnic minorities, you have a problem, because you shouldn't notice these things. When I go to the Huntington's disease meetings, that was a foundation, most of those were run by a foundation that set out to ensure that women had an equal footing. So one of the people who set the meetings up had a very feminist wife who I'm sure influenced him, and their policy was that half the people on the platform would be women. And I just went to one of these meetings in August, and still more than half the people in the meeting now are women. So where it used to be just on the platform, and most of the scientists were probably a quarter women and 3/4 men, now it's in 10 years, 15 years, it's become very women-led, and it's a very woman-led society. In other fields it's not the same. So in Cambridge we have a Cambridge Neuroscience, and we have a policy which with the help of another man who is running the Athena Swan, we now have a policy where public talks, we aim to have 50% women in all talks. And people around the table say, well, in engineering and maths, we don't have that many faculty who are women. My argument is that the audience is 50% of women, so you should tailor your talks to the audience, because the people who give talks are role models. So I think role models are really important, and it should be right up there. When you look at a list of speakers, you should have half women and half men, because unless you are at a university where the balance is different, those are going to be the people in the audience. And it's really dispiriting to see still, I'll occasionally go to a meeting where every speaker, apart from a token woman, is still a man. And I find that really dispiriting, because with a really tiny change in policy, where you actually have a policy of having half the speakers on the platform, on the list, being women, is very easy to implement.
It's a very strong
my friend
message.
from the Hereditary Disease Foundation said, when he started this out, people go, well, there's nobody who works on this as the best man. And he said, well, what about somebody in his lab? And then he said he found that there was a very famous man, and there was always a woman who was very good in his group, and they basically asked the second person in the group to give talks, and that's how they got their gender balance. And I think it's a good place to start. If we can get gender balance right, then we don't have to worry about it. We can move on to more challenging.
I think that's a very strong message, especially for young people in science. And I'm not just talking about women, even men, when they start as students, they need to feel that both genders are represented, basically.
Absolutely.
And anyway, that's what I think.
But Cambridge has 50% men, or actually it has about 60% women and 40% men overall in the undergraduate population. So every time they go to something, there should be the same numbers represented.
Can I just add a point to that, just from a man point of view? But a young man, as in, hopefully I'm young. In my age, when I'm working with, say, Lucy's my colleague, and I have a couple of other colleagues, and we're at an age where we're not, at high positions at the moment. But in what I never feel that Lucy's a woman or something like that. Is it at her age? I'm also wondering, is that something which will either come with age, that you know men have to be at the top, women not so much, or is this an old generation thing, and now as the generation is moving now, there is probably going to be more equality or more non-discrimination between males and females.
I think so. I hope it's a wave, that it's actually just slowly catching up. I'm at Cambridge, which is very male dominated. There are other universities that are better, but I still think that in meetings, Society for Neuroscience tries to keep a balance, but you see sometimes this creeps in, and that it's unbalanced, and not in the sort of, sometimes there's all women and sometimes there's all men. It does tend to be led from the top. So I think young people doing, interacting with people and getting on committees where you have talks, and I think postdocs now also have societies where they are seen to be seen, and they can invite people. They can invite who they like. I think it will get better. It's a wave that probably, it's a slow moving wave.
Yes, hopefully it will
20
push
years.
away to it. Yes. So the generic question would be, what advice should you give to budding scientists or young scientists? But I'd also want to add on to that, what advice would you give to my daughter who's now in secondary school? How do I get her more interested into pursuing a career in research in this day and age?
Advice to a young scientist, that's easy. Just do something you're interested in. Try different things. Don't do things that are just going to get you a new technique that you're not interested in. So you will find something that you're passionately interested in, and you go for it, is something that is what I've always done. Advice to your daughter, I'm not actually sure I would encourage her to go into science, which sounds cynical, but I think it's very difficult, and it's not something that you just go, oh, I think I'll do that. It's as much a vocation as it is a career.
Right.
And although I know that's probably not the advice that people listening think I should be giving, but I'm not sure that if I had a daughter I would encourage her to go into science now, because it's very hard to get money. It's very hard to get established. It's competitive, and you have a lot of other things. You get a lectureship and you have to lecture, and teaching loads are very large, so it's a challenging task. And then you're expected to do fantastic science as well, and then you try and publish your science. It's hard. It's a hard career now, and science has also boomed. It's massive. You guys have looked up what I do because we've had this podcast, but keeping up with even your own field is really hard.
That's
and
true.
so the information explosion is really challenging.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I love being a scientist, so I would love somebody to have the chances I've had, but encouraging my child to become a scientist, it's a really hard career.
It is tough, and I've noticed that as I've gone further along this path, more and more people that I started out with have fallen by the wayside at various stages. So I don't know whether they're the intelligent ones who have made the right choice to get out while they can, but it is that constant struggle of you've got to be getting the grant money, publishing, and as you said, as soon as you start teaching, you're then having to balance all these different non-research based things, but as you said, still trying to get the money and get that cutting edge science with the publications. So
I think it comes back to what you were saying about younger people, it being different. So there are some things that you can take advantage of. So many universities have mentoring systems now.
Yeah.
You must take advantage of mentoring.
Yeah.
I never had a mentor. And there were many times when I would look and think, oh, how did he get to do that? And then you would see that there would be 3 or 4 people who were pushing, promoting them. And if you have a mentor, it makes life easier. So there are some things you can do to make it easier, and getting a good mentor or two, and participating in groups so that you're talking to people that you, and when things are tough, that you're not alone as well. So when your paper is rejected, that you can you find any scientist and they can give you a list of papers that have been rejected for silly reasons.
I think you do need that support, because when papers or when grant applications are rejected, you've invested so much time in it and you're so proud of it, and then to suddenly have people tearing it apart, it can be quite demoralising, and you've got to be able to have that support to enable you to pick yourself up and keep trying and keep going.
But that doesn't get any better when you get older. You still you invest a lot of emotional energy into things, and then when somebody rejects it, it's very upsetting. But I do get less upset about it now. I just go, oh well, whatever.
Right, so we're just going to finish this podcast on some quick fire questions just to get to know a bit more about you, Jenny.
So how about, what is your favorite food?
Fish.
Fish.
Favorite city?
Cambridge, probably.
Which is home now, I'm guessing. Yes.
Favourite musician or band?
Favourite musician or band? Paavo Järvi at the moment.
Okay.
He's a conductor though, so I think that counts.
Yep,
I saw a fantastic proms that the Estonian Festival Orchestra did, so he's my current.
Great.
Wow.
Favorite film?
Lawrence of Arabia.
Good one.
Nice. Favorite sport, but more specifically, do you like cricket? Coming from New Zealand, or rugby?
Rugby.
Yes.
My favourite sport is rugby.
See, we have a lot in common with the Welsh, because we're big on rugby as well. Yes.
Actually, I hope, touch wood, we get the test match on Sunday. So.
Favourite pastime or hobby?
Oh, pastime or hobby? I suppose it sounds really trite, but gardening.
Okay.
I actually like growing things, and and gardening's a great cure for science, because it doesn't matter if you mess things up. You've always got next year. So I garden, and I like pulling things out, and you can. Science goes very slowly, so sometimes you can work all week and you never see anything for what you've done. Gardening and baking, you can go into the garden and you can weed a whole patch, and you go, oh look, and you have a big pile of weeds on one side and a patch of bare earth on the other, and it's actually very satisfying. And you can also think, if you've had a bad week, you can chop things out and mentally argue things out. You can think about science. You can, I
actually started baking.
Baking's the same.
I'm not very good, I will admit, but it helps so much.
Well, gardening's better for your figure.
Yeah, that's true.
Any childhood ambition or dream?
Yeah, I wanted to. Nobody's ever asked me that, but I wanted to be an explorer. So my childhood
brilliant.
idols were explorers like Scott and polar
Yeah,
explorers. I hate
yeah.
the cold, so I would have made a hopeless explorer. And Richard Burton and people like that. I was fascinated with exploring. And then when I grew up, I realised I did actually have the careers advice, and I said I wanted to be an explorer. And my careers advisor said, "Well, don't be ridiculous. You'll have to be a secretary."
Oh, that's terrible.
But now I'm a scientist, you see, which is kind of being an
yeah,
explorer.
absolutely.
Yes.
I grew up idolising George Mallory, who
Oh
was
yeah.
yeah. So for anyone not familiar with George Mallory, he is the guy who, in my eyes, was the first to climb Mount Everest. I believe he made it to the top, but he didn't make it down. Sorry, Edmund Hillary, New Zealander. Sorry.
No,
Yeah, so I grew up idolising George Mallory, and it's probably a terrible admission, but one of the reasons I went to Cambridge is because George Mallory went to Magdalen College, and I just grew up loving this man, and his motto was always sort of that because it's there, that why not attitude, and I loved that, just sort of anything's possible, just go for it, and his determination to succeed was really inspiring to me as a child, and as a result I was desperate to go to sort of Everest and see it in all the glory and sort of almost go where he once went. So yeah, I love that sort of exploration, discovering new things. So final question, if you weren't a scientist, what would be your alternative career?
Apart from explorer.
Apart from explorer.
Obviously.
You know what? Or I think I'd have to be an explorer. I can't be an explorer.
Yeah, go for it.
I don't have another career that I would want to do. And if I had to start again, I just like being a scientist.
Yeah, that's fantastic though.
Maybe I'll
because
be
then
a
it's obviously
teacher, but I am a
passion.
teacher.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I already have like multiple careers. I'm a teacher. I wouldn't be a very good lawyer. I'd be a terrible accountant because I get bored. There's lots of careers I wouldn't be very good at doing.
Yeah,
I think we'll just have to stick with science or
Scientist or
exploration.
explorer. Excellent.
Tropical explorer, I'd like to change to that.
Yeah, that would be very good. So wonderful. Thank you very much, Jenny, for joining us. And
My
that
pleasure.
concludes our latest podcast. So we shall see you all in the next podcast. Bye-bye.